I know. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hi, thank you so much for coming to tonight's event, the grand opening of our newest exhibition up on the fourth floor. It's called Health in Space, Daring to Explore. The new exhibition, Health in Space, Daring to Explore, was developed by the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, one of 3 museums under Ingenuum, Canada's Museums of Science and Innovation, in collaboration with the Canadian Space Agency. We also, with this exhibit, developed a companion exhibit that you will see on the 4th floor called New Technologies in Space Medicine. The International Museum of Surgical Science developed the New Technologies in Space Medicine exhibition in partnership with NASA, Virtual Incision, Axiom Space, the Beckman Institute for Advanced Science and Technology, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, and the Japanese Culture Center here in Chicago. We also would like to say a special thank you to our exhibition sponsor. Our leading sponsor is the Museums of Quinte. The Museums of Quinte are coming to a site on the Bay of Quinte in southern Ontario between Toronto and Montreal. The site will consist of a campus of 6 distinct museums, plus a large botanic garden. The technology used in gaming and practical education will provide dynamic learning experiences about medicine, space, science, and much more. I'm pleased to present to you tonight our keynote speaker, Dr. Megan Everett from the ISS. She is the ISS Program Deputy Scientist. ISS is the International Space Station from NASA. ISS Program Deputy Scientist Dr. Megan Everett supports research across a variety of technical areas for the International Space Station. She started her NASA career in 2007 as an intern in the Exercise Physiology Laboratory and conducted several ISS and analog research experiments focusing on human performance and optimizing crew health for ISS and exploration missions. Prior to her current position, Megan provided crew health support as the ISS Program Crew Health and Countermeasures System Integrator. Megan obtained a BS degree from Skidmore College in Exercise Physiology, and MS and PhD from University of Houston in Kinesiology, with a focus in molecular muscular physiology. Please help me to welcome Dr. Megan Everett.
All right, well, can you guys hear me okay? All right. Okay, well, thank you very much for that great introduction, and very honored to have the opportunity to speak here for this great opening event. All right, I'm going to walk in front of this podium because it's hard to not see your own slides from behind. So are you guys okay with this? You can hear me fine? Okay, great. All right, so starting off, this is a picture of our fantastic space station. For those of you guys that don't know, in addition to housing astronauts, it is a giant orbiting laboratory that does innovative, really like gold standard technology, cutting edge research. And so we're going to talk about that research today. We'll highlight some of the things, mostly things that we do in health space, but I'll give you a global introduction to what we do in space and science in general. All right, next chart, please. All right, thank you. Okay, so we're marking a pretty big landmark, over 20 years in space, almost 25 years of human habitation, continuous human habitation in space on the International Space Station. So we flew our first module, Zarya, in November of 1998, and we have been habitating space since 2000. So Expedition 1 started in March of 2000. So we've had crew members up there for quite some time. One of the things related to science we'll talk about is we're kind of in this third decade of space. So you think about the first decade, we had to build things in order to do science in space and do a lot of things in space. So we kind of call that first decade, as it relates to science, the decade of construction. And then the second decade, we actually got to use all of those things that we built. And so in that case, we were doing a lot of science. So really it was kind of the decade of utilization. And now we're in this third decade, and we've really figured out how to do things really well, and bring innovation, cutting edge science on the space station, have pretty good rapid turnover. So really now we can say we're in the decade of results, where you guys are hearing about all the great things that we're doing in space, and they're really having these great space-based scientists having really good Earth-based impact. So hopefully you'll see that in the charts as we go. Next chart. Okay, a couple of quick facts for those that don't know. Before I talk science, I like to just kind of put things in context. So the space station is traveling at over 17,000 miles an hour. It's about 250 miles above Earth all the time. So we can think of the Earth as the globe. So at any point in Earth, that's kind of a distance from 250 miles from there. And it's about the size of a football field. So it's pretty big. The other thing I want you to think about is as it's orbiting the Earth, it's moving quickly, the Earth is rotating, and while 250 miles seems pretty far, in the vastness of space, it's only 250 miles above Earth. So if you have the space station tracker, you can actually see the space station fly by the Earth, and on a nice clear night, you can see it go all the way around and you get a good long view of it. So if you think about, we get to go up and see the space station. We'll also attach to the outside of the space station at many different locations. We have hardware that is meant to visualize things on Earth, all kinds of near-infrared cameras, all kinds of technology that can tell us about space weather. We can see like natural disasters or really cool things that are going on Earth. So you can kind of think about it as that two-way communication going up and down. So we won't talk too much about space weather, but we'll talk about some of the external pieces of hardware that actually contribute to being able to improve health technologies today. Next chart. Okay, so sometimes we get the question, why do we do research in space and science in space? Well, we do a lot of it here on Earth, and we do really great things here on Earth. But when we do things outside of gravity, so we can do it outside of microgravity, we don't have the gravity pulling down, right? So you don't have sedimentation that you have to worry about. Some of our science, we can create these like very high vacuum environments. We can look at different thermal variations and different forms of radiation. So these are all things that are very unique from the Earth. And in a lot of cases, like we do a lot of protein crystallization work. We actually form much clearer crystals, much more uniform crystals than we do here on Earth, because we don't have the effects of gravity, which is a really important part in drug development in the pharmaceutical industry. So those are all some things where we get these unique benefits to space. And then from a human and life sciences part, I'll talk about this later, but we can kind of mimic the effects of aging much faster in space. So that gives us this great ability to do science with a little bit higher turnaround compared to things on Earth that would take years and years to do. All right, next chart. Okay, so this is kind of to put everything together and talk about our real decade of results, right? So we have more than 5,000 researchers that have taken part in investigations on the space station. We have over 4,000 different experiments and over 4,000 publications. And these are really high impact publications going to these really great journals, not just kind of things that might end up like in your coffee table or something. So we're doing really great work, and really great work that you guys are hearing about that's impactful. Next chart. Okay. So I had started talking about the different areas of research that we do on the space station. And so we do a lot of biology and biotechnology, so you can think about plant growth, you can think about cells, organelles, Earth and space science, so really looking at climate changes and predicting weather patterns in space. We do a lot of human research, so how does your body respond to the microgravity environment, and how can we have hoped to improve life here on Earth with that, as well as further explore beyond low Earth orbit outside of the space station. We do physical science, so there's a lot of work with fundamental things like looking at combustion factors, looking at the different flow rates of fluid, how things flow across different gradients. Got furnaces that can pretty much explode things that get so hot in space, right? And then we have technology developments. So, what are the new things that we can actually manufacture in space, or how do we use different instruments in space? And so, while we talk about these things kind of all separately here, one of the things I want you to think about is actually they all go together. And so we have these different groups, but everyone collaborates to bring the best pieces of their knowledge forward to enhance science in space. And as we're talking about this event opening, you'll see exactly how we have a lot of engineers and medical professionals and these great minds getting together to advance what we can do here on Earth, as well as what we can do in space. So really think about those collaborative efforts and those different areas of expertise and how we can make the most of those. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the human response to spaceflight. So I kind of want to just set the stage here for what happens to humans in space. So we have both acute adaptations, so kind of like right when you get there, and then things that happen after you've been exposed to space for a long time. So most of our astronauts are in space anywhere from 4 to 6 months to up to a year or longer. We have some that are there for a shorter period of time, maybe just like 10 days or 14 days. So when you first get to space, some astronauts get kind of space sickness. So just think about really bad motion sickness, and you just kind of feel bad for a while. Some you'll see everyone gets fluid shifts. So if you see pictures of astronauts, their heads might look, or their faces might look a little fat or thick, right? It's because all the fluids are going up into their, not all of them, they're going up into their heads because you don't have microgravity keeping your blood down at your legs. Some of the more long-term adaptations we see is a reduction in muscle mass or strength, a decrease in bone density. We have some astronauts experience what we call SANS, which is their vision is affected. Some just from being in an isolated environment away from their families, they get a little bit of depression, really benefit from that communication back to their families. So a lot of these we've developed really good countermeasures for, and things like muscle strength and decreases in aerobic fitness and bone loss. We've really mitigated those a lot over time, and our astronauts come back pretty healthy because we have these great countermeasures. Our nutritional program has been greatly enhanced over the years. But we still see things that we're working on figuring out how we best control those. And we're learning new things that we're going to have to figure out as we explore space beyond low Earth orbit, which is where the space station is now. So when we go to destinations like the moon and stay there for a long time, or when we start figuring out how we're going to go to Mars, those are all things that we need to work on. So you'll see a lot of things here. We actually draw blood in space. So this is what these two crew members right now are doing, is they're drawing their blood. And this blood, we actually have it timed really well. So some of the blood gets frozen or spun down and frozen while they're in space. Some of it actually gets returned to Earth as soon as the capsule undocks. So we're able to get the blood from the astronaut's vein to the lab for analysis in less than 48 hours, which is a really great, remarkable achievement with all the new space traffic we've been able to look at. And that gives us a lot of data from these live blood samples that we can't get a lot from frozen samples. All right, next. Okay, this is so look quickly and closely because the video is short, but you'll see this moving. This is a cardiac organelle, so it's a group of cardiac cells and tissue and construct. And we actually grew that in space, and you can basically see these are heart tissues starting to learn to beat in space. That's pretty cool, what we're able to do right now. So I'll say these charts are like pictures of the really cool things and highlights that we've done in space and pictures that I love. So if you guys have questions along the way, I'll try my best to answer these. This chart over here, so when we do a lot of our health-based and space-based work, you have to do it in a closed-in environment. And so they're all in glove boxes. So you can kind of see there's a piece of glass separating the astronaut, and these are her hands here. So she's sticking them through the glove box and doing the work on the cells or whatever she's working on there. So this here, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but here we can actually look at how cells and organelles behave differently in space, as well as how they respond to different drugs or different pharmaceuticals in space. So we can really look at those pathways and give us good insight to that. And because, like I said, the cells age a little bit more quickly in space than they do on Earth, we can also look at some kind of like increased signs of aging and how different pharmaceutical medications work on these aged cells. Sure. Okay, one of the like groundbreaking, really cool things that we're doing in space, and this is started fairly recently, is biomanufacturing. So the idea is that we can actually produce things in space and return it to Earth. And the reason we would produce it in space is because we can make it better in space than we can do it on Earth, right? And we can do different innovative things in space than on Earth. So if we go to the next chart. Yes, okay. So this is really like what is some cutting edge research that we're really like starting to develop, and it's really going to be beneficial to the commercial market. The space station probably isn't the best thing to produce things and bring it back to Earth, but what we're demonstrating is that we can actually produce these things in space. So we've done a few like very cool things in the last year that me being a physiology person, I'm super excited about. So we collaborate with a company called Redwire, and they have made this biofabrication facility. So basically it's a 3D printing biofabrication facility. And so we 3D print tissues here on Earth, and we can do ligaments, and we can do cartilage, and we can do different types of tissues. One of the challenges of doing these 3D bioprinting on Earth is you get sedimentation. So sometimes the tissues are not continuous. They don't behave quite as well as the tissues that are like in your own body for these reasons. They're not quite as uniform. So your body accepts them. They work better than your broken one of why you're getting it, but it's not perfect, right? So in space, we can actually 3D print things with a little bit better mechanical capabilities than we can here on Earth. We are still figuring out how to do that really well in space, though. So one thing, you might have heard about this in the media, we had our first successful bioprint of the human knee meniscus, and that was in 2004, I think, or 2024, I think it was, or 2023. So that we actually printed a human meniscus in space, and then we returned it to Earth. And so the scientists are now looking at the mechanical properties of that human meniscus and comparing it to one that was printed here on Earth, as well as like a real human meniscus, which to me is super cool that we're actually like printing human tissues in space and bringing them down to Earth.
Did they implant it?
No,
okay.
No, they didn't implant it yet, so we're not quite there. So it's kind of, no, that's a really great question though. So one of the things they're doing is actually looking at the different properties and making sure that it is as useful and functional as a meniscus that we would print here on Earth. So they're looking at all kinds of different tensile strength properties associated with it, and the next steps, they actually have funding to do more bioprinting of these ligaments, so there should be more to come. And then we also had a bioprint of live human heart tissue. So we're not off printing human hearts, but small sections of the tissue that actually show the contractile properties of the human heart, which also equally fantastic and amazing to think about that we can do those kinds of things in space. So right now, one of the things is the cost point. It's very expensive to print things in space, but demonstrating that we can do it and eventually get to the point where we can produce these things quicker and faster and hopefully better than we do on Earth, so that they're more transplantable to the human. All right, next slide. Okay, this is another one that has actually gained a lot of attention. This is printing retina. So basically doing artificial retina manufacturing in space. And so this is actually been going on for several years with the Lamb Division, the company that's doing it. And so they've been able to target this protein that is very susceptible to light. And they produce these very thin layers in space. And you actually can't produce layers this thin on Earth. And they're very uniform. So you see this picture, that little tiny purple dot in the middle is the retina that they would implant and use as a retinal replacement. So they've actually returned these to Earth. This company is pretty far along, and they still have research planned. They're actually going through some initial FDA trials right now that would allow this, like in the next couple of years, to be implanted in the human retina. And the protein that they're using is actually much improved compared to the one that they can use here on Earth. So this is a really great achievement and something that will like be in the hands of users pretty quickly. Next chart. Let's see. Go to the next one. You can go to the next one. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the other thing, so technology development. So as I had talked about in the beginning, we have a lot of sensors on the outside of the space station that tell us about different climate control and things on Earth. So one of these is called NICER. It's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer. So basically this is able to take X-ray data from these neutron stars and look at kind of their different heat mapping and radiation components coming out of that star, right? And so while we think about that as only external, it is actually really great technology and some of what our researchers are working on at a lot of different medical institutions of how we can kind of use the X-rays to get better imaging and deeper imaging. So I was actually looking at one of the displays in the museum here, and it was all about like the history of X-rays and how, you know, first we could just go like very shallow tissues and get like, you know, very little fidelity, and now, you know, we can go deeper and deeper into the tissues. And so they're actually working with this same type of technology to be able to improve some CT scanning capabilities and get better definition and have less radiation going to the patient from these different X-rays. So I thought this was really cool how we kind of have a shared technology, and it is a really great example of how we've got engineers and medical technologists working in the same area and on the same thing. Next chart. Okay, this is another thing that, you know, a lot of times when we talk about doing remote medicine, you know, we talk about doing it for third world countries or like in war fields and things like this, right? Well, one of the things that we really have to think about in space is how we treat our astronauts from the Earth. And so while we're on the space station, there's a whole crew of flight doctors that treat the astronauts, and a lot of the astronauts actually are doctors themselves. But some of these we have to have like remote control on the ground in order to do this, and there's a time delay when we start doing these. We have a whole team talking about sutures in space and how there was robotic control of doing their demonstration on this. And so this is actually a very great collaborative effort where we've seen examples of doing things in space remotely, and it's very similar to the environment that we would do it in remote medicine, where a lot of times you do have that time delay, or most of our astronauts are not doctors, so they don't know what they're looking at, right? They just know fundamentally like press this button and do this ultrasound scan, and someone on the ground is telling them what to look for. They have no idea if they're getting a good image or a bad image, right? And so really having these shared technologies and being able to expand remote medicine capabilities in both places is a huge achievement. So this one is looking, I think this is actually Antarctica, where they're doing a remote ultrasound. And then here, actually on the picture over here, they're scanning the retina of the eye, which is what I was talking about before when We have changes in vision, so they think a lot of it is due to changes in the retina. So we have ultrasound scans that they do. And there is a team of doctors in space that they're calling up and getting real-time images down. So they're telling the crew member, like, move the probe or change the settings on the probe so you can get a better picture, picture of the eye, or we'll do like muscle scans in space. So this is really cool technology and amazing just to think at how fast you can get images and data up and down from Earth to the space station and have that real-time communication. Next chart. Okay. The other thing we look at is, so when we're in space, we kind of want to know how the astronauts are doing, like how they're feeling. And we globally are like really bad at being our own self kind of doctors and saying like how we're feeling, because like I always feel good, right? And, my data might tell you, but if you're gonna tell me like, hey, you're gonna go out the door of the space station and do a spacewalk tomorrow, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm feeling great because I want to do that spacewalk, right? I might not have slept for more than 4 hours in 2 weeks, and maybe like I didn't eat that great of food, but I'm still gonna tell you I'm feeling great, okay? And so using actual health data to know and have a database of like how the astronaut is feeling is really important to be able to do. So we've got a lot of biosensors, which we're doing as technology demonstrations. So these can be vests that they'll wear, sometimes they can be rings, they can be very simple heart rate monitors. So these are not invasive things that we're implanting anything right now. These are all very like wearable biometrics that the crew can wear around. They can do continuous monitoring, or they can just do monitoring while they're sleeping or while they're exercising. And it gives the doctors on the ground an idea of how they're feeling. And so if you think about on the Earth, right, like everyone wears a smartwatch or everyone has something that's being tracked. So we're building these big data sets. We're building them, whether you know it or not, you're contributing to a big data set every time you wear your smartwatch and you're recording something, right? So we're trying to do the same thing in space and building a space-based data set. So you can take your metrics on Earth and you can take your metrics on space and you can see what variables change and how you respond to those changes. So from there, you can build a lot of AI algorithms, you can build a lot of different information technology pathways, but basically you can create, with a set of data, you can create a database clone of yourself that tells us how you're feeling. And so we can do it here on Earth and we can do it in space. But there's a lot of effort being put on figuring out what that space-based model looks like. Maybe on Earth, for example, if you're a person on Earth and if you don't get sleep, enough sleep for 2 or 3 days in a row, maybe you're really, really impacted by that. You get cranky, you can't really function, right? But there are some people that can go weeks without getting enough sleep and they're okay, but if they don't get enough food, they respond differently. So we're trying to figure out the same thing in space and you can kind of use those different algorithms to make it very personalized and kind of predict ahead of time when you're going to start feeling tired and when you need to implement some change. So that is a lot of work that's being done, particularly by the Canadian Space Agency. They have a lot of efforts going on for this. And actually, if you go upstairs, I think there is a vest either by the European or Canadian Space Agency that is a biomonitoring vest that measures all kinds of things. So you'll be able to see that in the museum. All right, sutures in space. This team was actually here and talked about this the last couple of days. But this was really cool, where we had doctors on the ground doing robotic surgery while people in space were doing the same robotic surgery, and kind of looking at how the time delay affects the ability to do this surgery. And so they were using rubber bands, not human tissue or anything quite yet. This was just a technology demonstration. But they've been looking at the data and processing the data and looking at the fidelity of being able to robotically control and do surgeries from the ground on different space conditions. So we're pretty far from doing robotic surgery in space right now, but these are kind of the first steps that we need to start developing. If you think about, we have someone walking on the moon and they're living up there for 2 weeks, the moon is very unexplored, and we don't know a lot about the hazards of it, other than the images that we get, right? So someone's probably gonna fall and get hurt, or something's gonna happen. This is in comparison to the space station. It's completely man-made, and we know every single square inch of the space station and all of the hazards. So the risk of something unpredictable happening on the space station are far less than if you're walking around on the moon, doing habitat construction and doing things where you really have to make a little bit more autonomous decisions and like have less awareness and ground-based control of the things around you. So that will be important going forward. Next chart. All right, recent research results. So these are just kind of highlights of the really cool things that we've done recently. Next chart. Okay, so we do a lot of cancer research in low Earth orbit on the space station. Axiom, which is one of our space-based sponsors, they've funded a lot of the research. ISS National Labs, which is kind of our commercial counterpart, they have lots of research on the space station. They do a lot of this. So there's a big effort right now out of the White House called Cancer Moonshot. I'm not sure if you guys have all heard of that. And so we actually partner with them and do a lot of research that is aimed towards curing cancer. So some of these images here, I think these are actually from breast cancer cells, and there's a drug called Roboxin, and they've actually shown that in these cells, they actually age quicker on the space station, or they kind of age in a cancer-related way faster on the space station. And when they are treated with Robaxin, they respond very quickly, even faster than our cells here do on Earth. So what they've been able to show is that this is a very effective treatment quickly. And then they can kind of use that to start some of their ground-based studies too. So there's a lot of parallel ground and space-based research. Sure. All right, this is a mini flow cytometer. And so a flow cytometer, you put in cells and blood that can count the cells. So basically it's a cell counting machine. And what this can be used for is diagnostics in space. So if you can count cells in your blood, or you can count different immune cells and things like that, you can use it to diagnose disease in space, or just diagnose any sort of immune changes in space. So this will be a big hit. Yes, go ahead.
The things that you said that were quicker in space, like the breast cancer thing. So is there anything that when you bring them back to Earth, do they regress at all? Like go back to their behavior that would be in Earth?
So that there are we haven't done that direct comparison yet. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this. So they don't necessarily, the cells that we get back, what we'll do with them is they'll put them in space, and we'll show, so the first step of the study was to show, okay, see what happens to cancer cells in space. That was step one. And so what we showed is that there's actually acceleration in the progression of cancer cells when they're in space compared to on the ground. So the team figured that out, and they said, okay, well, step two is let's see how we treat these cells, and we try to reverse it. And so they were actually able to show that when you treat them with pharmaceuticals, they respond quickly to these pharmaceuticals. What we also learned from these cancer cells in space is you kind of have to think about when we're treating cancer, you have to understand the cell itself and how it's progressing with the disease. And then on the other side, you have the work that's being done on the pharmaceutical side of the company of it. And so a lot of the protein crystallization that I talked about is used in part of these cancer treatments. So we had this group that was working, one's working on a cell line, one's working on these cancer treatments. And so what we were able to actually do is create a cancer curing agent, and show that we were able to create it in space. So it was much more effective and could be effective at smaller doses. So what that means for the patient on Earth is there's less side effects, right? And then we were able to show that this treatment was well accepted in space, and that it slowed down, or in some cases reversed the cancer in space. when we return the cells to Earth, they still respond to that same treatment. There's not really like a one-for-one comparison that we can do to say like that the growth changed just because of the different environments, but it still shows that they're responsive to that treatment, so that it is an effective cancer treatment. And that particular drug is actually going through clinical trials right now, which is very cool to see. All right, next chart. All right, and then this is actually really cool. Like, so muscle on chips. So basically, this is looking at the actual full muscle tissue, not just the cell. So in this way, you can look at kind of the mechanical properties of the muscle, like rather than just looking at individual muscle cells. So here, we're able to put these muscles on chips, and you're able to look at the strength, the tensile strength of the muscle and how it contracts and changes in space. So this is just really great new technology. It's basically like tissue on chips. So in this, they were able to identify some different countermeasures that were effective in maintaining the muscle contraction in these tissue samples on space. Sure. All right, no, that's all I have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just curious, are those muscle tissues grown or biopsies from volunteers or?
I need to go back and look. I think that they were. I think they were actually like growing muscle, not from humans or not from animals, but actually like 3D generated or 3D printed samples. But I can go back and find out for you. And then this, if you're interested in NASA research, snap this. We have all kinds of cool media that you can follow along. That's all I have for you guys today, but I am more than happy to take any questions or just chat after this if you have more detailed questions. Yes?
Is it true that people age slower in space?
Actually, it is the opposite. They age faster in space. Yeah. So a lot of the things you'll see that, like a lot of when they lose strength in space, it's sort of like the muscle wasting diseases that people get here on Earth when they're older, and they're reversible. So when the astronauts come back, they regain their strength. A lot of them regain their bone mass, or it like slows down to normal speeds. But we see the rate of so we can see telomere lengthening. So telomeres are the things at the end of your chromosomes, and they tell you kind of how long your DNA has. So those actually shorten much faster in space than they do here on Earth. So basically that means your cells are recycling and going through that life cycle faster in space than they would on Earth. There are some really cool studies. So there was the twin study. So we had a twin flying in space for a year, and one twin was in space and one twin was on the ground. And so one of the things they've been looking at is telomere length in that. And that was actually the kickoff of why we started looking at cancer research in space, seeing that we have accelerated cellular cycles, and therefore we could study cells faster in space. Yes?